published. Somebody check quick YouTube.
Yep.
Good. All right. Hey, as I was saying, good morning, everybody. I want to go ahead and get started this morning. You guys should have in front of you, you that are in-house, a set of notes for Lesson 262, Assessing the Printed History of the King James Text, and we're going to look at King James Version only italics case studies. If you are joining us right now on the live stream or are watching this after the fact, you can go to gracelifebiblechurch.com, scroll down under April 13 here under Recent Sermons. You can click the link and you can load the notes and follow along with us as we go through the material this morning. Okay? So, let's get right into things. Lesson 262. All right, so in Lesson 261, we continued our study of italics in the Authorized version by looking at what certain King James only authors have said about the matter. The lesson critically examined arguments made by Dr. Samuel C. Gipp, and again, that's in the book, the Answer book here from 1989, a help book for Christians. So we sort of framed the conversation by that. So again, the lesson critically examined arguments made by Dr. Samuel C. Gipp and others. So we also looked at some statements by Gene Kim, Brandon Peterson, a couple others. Did I look at Gene Kim last time? I don't remember now. Maybe I did. I know we looked at Reagan, and we looked at David Reagan, and we looked at Brandon Peterson, and maybe one other one. Anyway, regarding the significance and inspiration of italicized words. The teaching challenged the notion that these italicized words are divinely inspired additions and explored the complexities of Bible translation, preservation, and interpretation. In summation, Lesson 261 covered the following points. Number one, King James onlyism often presents a false dichotomy regarding italicized words. Either accept them all or remove them all. We talked about that, if you recall. Number two, the inconsistent use of italics across different editions of the King James Version is not addressed by many King James Version only advocates. Number three, New Testament quotations of Old Testament passages that include italicized words in the KJV are used to argue for the divine inspiration of these words. Number four, Lesson 261 critiqued the conflation of the King James Bible with the Bible itself, excluding other translations and even source texts. So we talked about that in Lesson 261. Number five, we emphasized the importance of understanding the purpose of italicized words in translation without attributing divine inspiration to them. And lastly, we highlighted the problems with claiming that Jesus and the apostles quoted from a King James Bible that did not exist in their time. So, before we move any further, anybody got any comments, questions, or anything for the good of the order regarding the review from last week? We're good there? So, while Gipp's work was used to frame the discussion, we also observed other King James Version only authors who argued similarly. Brandon Peterson, David Reagan, Gene Kim, and a gentleman named Thomas Carroll. Okay? So in this lesson, we want to focus on two case studies regarding the italics that garner a lot of attention in pro-King James argumentation. The first being 2 Samuel 21:19, and then 1 John chapter 2, verse 23. So those are going to kind of be the case studies that we're going to look at here. Okay? Now, understand, are there a bunch of instances of italics in the King James? Yes. We can't possibly look at all of them. So I have selected what I perceive to be two of the major case studies that come up all the time in the argumentation that I've read in pro-King James books, etc. Okay? So let's get right into it then. 2 Samuel 21:19. Discussion of 2 Samuel 21:19 appears in almost every treatment of italics by King James only authors. And then I just have a sampling of a list of names. Okay? Sam Gipp, David L. Brown, Thomas Carroll, Gene Kim, and James L. Melton, to name but a few. So this verse is discussed a lot when it comes to the issue of italics. Okay? Dr. Gipp calls this verse, quote, one of the classic defenses for leaving the italicized words alone. That's from page 54 of the Answer book. Recall from Lesson 261 that Gipp does not address why the phrase, the brother of, is in italics in the Authorized version, nor does he mention the relevant cross-reference, should say cross-reference, not cross-references, in 1 Chronicles chapter 20, verse 5. Okay? So remember, we've looked at this example now a couple different times, and we know that there's the insertion of an italicized phrase, the brother of. Okay? So, we're not going to look at all that again. I want to build on that. I want to take time to do that. I just want to keep moving forward here. Okay? Because we've already seen that in at least 2 other lessons. Plus, it's going to come up again. So, Gene Kim addresses the matter extensively in his YouTube video titled, Why KJV Should Add to God's Words, Part 2. Okay? And that was from June 21, 2017. So those of you that have the digital notes, you can click on the link and it'll take you and you can watch Gene Kim's video. Regarding the italics in 2 Samuel 21:19, Kim states the following, quote, okay, now, is that enough evidence? Well, actually, I got so much more evidence. Look at 2 Samuel 21. 2 Samuel 21. See, the scriptural evidence is loaded. Look at 2 Samuel 21. And by the way, all I did was copy-paste out of the YouTube transcript. YouTube generates a transcript. I copied and pasted what Gene Kim said. I took out all the numbers from the timestamps, and then I subjected the block of text and got it down to, and got it reformatted into the text that you have in front of you, okay? So any awkwardness here is, that's why, because he's talking out loud. He's not necessarily writing it out the way that we're reading it now, but this is what he said. The scriptural evidence is loaded. You must understand, you got to deny scriptural evidence if you don't believe in italics. Okay? You must, and trust me, this is just a handful of portions. There's a lot more verses we can find. This is just a handful I'm giving out. There are a lot of believing preachers and scholars out there that give a lot more. Let's look at 2 Samuel 21, and we're going to read verse 19. All right, very simple question. Who killed Goliath? David, or was it Elhanan? What in the world, Pastor? Who is Elhanan? Yeah, that's right. It should be David, right? That's common sense. All right, look at 2 Samuel 21:19. Now there was again a battle in Gob with the Philistines, where Elhanan, the son of Jarim, a Bethlehemite, slew. Look at this. The brother of is italicized. If you take out the word brother, if that's not in the original, then who did Elhanan kill? Elhanan did not kill the brother of Goliath. Elhanan killed Goliath. But I thought David killed Goliath. Isn't that just ABC Sunday school? You don't need to be a modern scholar. But unfortunately, you do have to become, unfortunately, you do have to become a modern scholar, waste hundreds and thousands of dollars to get doctorate degrees just to deny this, when all you have to do is go to Sunday school for free, and you'll know this. And you know what's amazing? You go to church for free, and people don't even want to go. But people want to pay money to go to a seminary to deny this. It's amazing, okay? So, okay, I'm already seeing some heads roll. Let me read the next part, and then we'll see where we're at as far as questions go, or comments. In this quotation, Kim is arguing in defense of the italicized words in the King James Bible, using 2 Samuel 21:19 as an example. He points out that the verse says Elhanan killed someone, and if the italicized phrase, the brother of, is removed, it would suggest Elhanan killed Goliath, not David, which contradicts the well-known Bible story. Kim criticizes modern Bible scholars and seminaries for denying the authority of these italicized words, arguing that even basic Sunday school knowledge supports the King James Bible reading. He emphasizes that the italicized words are essential for preserving biblical clarity and truth. Okay? So stop there. Anybody got any comments or questions before we go any further? Does everybody understand what Gene Kim is arguing? Any thoughts or comments before we move on? Did you have something? I saw you squirming.
It's just the anti-intellectualism bothers me, everything.
Okay. So, does any of this explanation on the part of leading King James onlyists regarding the italics in 2 Samuel 21:19 make any sense? Now, how does pitting the KJV against the Hebrew text by Gene Kim fit the doctrine of preservation? Do you notice, if you go back to page 2 in your notes, notice the phrase in the second paragraph where he says in the second paragraph, all right, look at 2 Samuel 21:19, and there was again a battle in Gob with the Philistines where Elhanan, the son of Jarim, a Bethlehemite, slew. Look at this. The brother of is in italicized words. If you take out the italicized words, if that's not in the original, then who did Elhanan kill? Now, am I the only one that perceives there to be a tacit pitting of the King James Bible against the Hebrew original in that statement? I am the only one, or you see it as well?
Oh, yeah. I mean, if the original doesn't have it, then there's a contradiction, he's saying.
That's essentially what he's saying, right? So, explanations, bottom, now top page 3 again. Explanations such as this on the part of King James onlyists are woefully inadequate and full of holes and blind spots. This is due in part to the fact that they do not consider enough of the relevant historical and textual information, okay? So, understand the argument. They're saying that, now let me just say personally, I don't have a problem with the phrase brother of being there. I don't have a problem with it being in italics. It does provide clarification based upon other cross references, okay? So I'm not disputing that. What I'm taking issue with here is how certain King James onlyists use this italicized phrase to argue certain things. Does everybody understand the distinction that I'm making here? Okay? Now, let's look at some evidence. Earlier, pre-1611 English Bibles dealt with the apparent discrepancy between 2 Samuel 21:19 and 1 Chronicles 21:5 and 1 Samuel 7:19 by inserting a marginal note. Consider the following screenshots. Okay? So this first one is from the Geneva Bible. Okay? And notice what it says. There was yet another battle in Gob with the Philistines, where Elhanan, the son of whatever that guy's name is, a Bethlehemite, slew, notice the P, Goliath the Gittite. Okay? So is there a marginal note right here telling you to go to find P in the margin? Now, if you come over here to the box that I have highlighted, notice what it says. This is Lahomi, the brother of Loma, I don't know how you say his name, brother of Goliath, whom David slew. And then notice, does it give the 1 Chronicles 20, verse 5 as a cross-reference in the margin? Okay? So how does the Geneva Bible deal with what might be perceived to be a discrepancy? They don't put the phrase in italics, but do they put a marginal note for the reader to clear up any confusion that might exist here? Okay? Look at the 1568 Bishop's Bible. Okay, you will notice the exact same thing. Okay, I'm not going to read the whole verse for the sake of time, but again, you'll notice the P here in the verse, directing you to the P in the margin, where you have essentially the exact same note in the margin of the 1568 Bishop's Bible that you had in the margin of the 1560 Geneva Bible. And then we have the 1602 Bishop's Bible, which is the immediate predecessor to the King James. And again, we have the P here directing you to the P in the margin, where again, we basically have an identical marginal note to clear up what might have been any discrepancy for the reader. Okay? Bottom of the page. So this is bottom of page 3. So pre-1611 English Bibles utilized the margin to direct readers to the relevant cross-reference while not electing to use italics or the equivalent thereof in the text. Okay? Now, italics into the verse versus flagging it with a marginal note and telling you to go to the margin where they basically give you the same information. I don't think there's functionally much of a difference between those two different approaches. Okay? So anybody want to comment on that before we move on? No? You good with that, Mike?
I'm okay with that.
Okay, top page 4. My friend and fellow researcher Christopher Yetzer furnished me with examples of how other Reformation-era Protestant Bibles handled 2 Samuel 21:19 in their respective translations. Please consider the following evidence. Okay? Now, the first one that I've got here is a 1562 Italian. So, this is from 1562. obviously, I don't read Italian, so I got help. It's pretty crazy what you can do. So you can take that screenshot, upload it to ChatGPT, and say, translate this image, and it'll spit out a translation. Okay? But notice, is there an italicized word in 2 Chronicles 21:19 in this Italian Bible from 1562? Does everybody see it? I got it underlined there in red. Okay? The Italian text reads as follows. So this is the translation. Then there was another war in Gob with the Philistines, where Elhanan, the son of whatever that guy's name is, struck Origemi, the Bethlehemite. Now notice, another Goliath. Okay? Another Goliath. So is it identifying this is someone who's like Goliath, but isn't the same what? Person. Another Goliath, the Gittite, the shaft of his spear was like a weaver's beam. So that word there, that corresponds with the word another, that underlined italicized word, it corresponds with the italicized word here, another. So is this Italian translation identifying that the person that is being killed here is like Goliath, but is not Goliath? Yes, thank you. Okay, and then you'll also see there's also a marginal note. So it's hard to read here, but there's a 19 here, which takes you over here to the 19, and then you have basically the exact same marginal note in Italian. You can see it right here at this point, right? Also, note also the marginal note appended to the italics, 19. This was the brother of Goliath, whom David struck. See 1 Chronicles 20, verse 5. Okay? So this Italian Bible from 1562 that predates the King James Bible, do they have an italicized word in Italian identifying that this is someone who's like Goliath but is not Goliath? And do they then have a marginal note in addition to that to clear up any remaining ambiguity about who this might be? Okay? And does all this predate the King James? Okay? So, let's look now also at a 1588 French Bible. Okay? You will notice again in French, do we have an italicized phrase here before the word Goliath?
Yes.
Right here. Okay? So let's look at this. The French translation from 1588 includes, that should say French words, includes the French words for brother of, more than 20 years before the Authorized version was published in 1611. So let's look at the translation here of this French. Okay, it's at the bottom of page 4. There was another war in Gob against the Philistines, in which Elhanan, son of Lahari, whatever that guy's name is, the Bethlehemite, struck the brother of Goliath the Gittite. Okay? So does this French Bible from 1588, more than 20 years before the King James Bible, do they insert an italicized phrase that says brother of? Okay? Let's go to top page 5. The Italian Diodati from 1607. Now, let me be also clear. There are some other Reformation era Bibles that don't do this, that don't do what we're looking at here. So the evidence is mixed. But I only included the examples of the ones that do it, okay? 1607 Italian Diodati, okay? Notice again, do we have an underline, do we have an italicized phrase here in Italian before Goliath? You guys are with me this morning, right? Yes, Pastor, there is. The Italian Diodati also includes the phrase in italics. Let's look at the translation. There was again another war against the Philistines in Gob, in which Elhanan, the son of that, or whoever that guy is, the Bethlehemite, struck the brother of Goliath the Gittite. So does the Italian from 1607 include the phrase, the brother of Goliath, in italics? Okay, so what do we see? We see 1566 Italian, right? Was it Italian? 1566 Italian, 1588 French, and also a 1607 French. All of these have in them this phrase, okay? Now, even more interesting, so what does that tell you? does that tell you that there were Bibles in existence in other Reformation era translations that inserted a phrase in there to help clear up what was going on for the reader? Okay? Now this next one is after the King James, but it's the 1637 Dutch Statenvertaling Bible. Okay? I'm not even going to try to read all this, but you'll notice, is there a italicized phrase in this verse in the Dutch? Yes. Okay? So, while translated after the King James Bible, the 1637 Dutch Bible also uses italics to indicate that the person killed by Elhanan was someone other than Goliath. So let's look at this translation. Okay? And there was yet another war with the Philistines at Gob, and Elhanan, the son of whatever that guy's name is, the Bethlehemite. Now watch. Which was with Goliath the Gittite. Okay? So it's very clear in the Dutch that the person being killed here by Elhanan wasn't Goliath. It was somebody who had been with who? Goliath. Does everybody follow that? Okay? So, now, note how Italian, 1562, 1607, French, 1588, and Dutch, 1637 Bibles use italics and or a marginal note to communicate to the reader that the person being killed in 2 Samuel 21:19 was someone other than who? So have we seen now multiple different approaches to communicating this to the reader in pre-1611 Bibles? In the English Bibles, we've seen the marginal notes in the Geneva Bible and the different editions of the Bishop's Bible. In the other foreign language Bibles, we've seen the use of italics as well as a marginal note to indicate that the person being killed by Elhanan in this verse is somebody other than who? Goliath. Now, did Gene Kim talk about any of this? No. Okay. Lastly, the KJV Today website has an interesting article on the verse in question titled "Brother of Goliath" or Goliath in 2 Samuel 21:19. The article is technical and encouraged reading for interested parties. So I'm not going to quote all of it here. I'm just going to quote what I think is the relevant part to our discussion. For our purposes, please consider the following portion of the article. Quote, "The second word of the underlined portions in both verses," and then they give you the Hebrew word here, okay, which is Goliath. The word preceding in 1 Chronicles 20, verse 5 is, I'm going to say it in English, Achaii? A-C-H-I?
Close enough.
Achaii, that's what I'm going with, okay? Which is translated brother of. Okay, so open your Bible quickly. We've got to do this quick. Open your Bible and go to 1 Chronicles 20. First Chronicles 20. Okay? Notice in 1 Chronicles 20, verse 5, notice verse 5, "And there was war again with the Philistines, and Elhanan, the son of Jair, which slew Elemi," that the brother of who? Now notice, is the brother of in that verse in italics?
Nope.
No, it's not in italics, okay? So what the KJV article is saying, notice what it says here. I'm at the very bottom of the page, okay? In 1 Chronicles 20, verse 5, is Achaii, which is translated the brother of, the word preceding the word for Goliath in 2 Samuel 21:19 is et, okay, with the Masoretic vowel markings. This word generally serves as an untranslatable particle which marks the accusative case, and that's from Brown, Driver, Briggs, Hebrew definitions. However, the word could serve a dual purpose of pointing to the direct object as well as meaning with or among, according to Brown, Driver, Briggs, Hebrew definitions. And then notice they give Judges chapter 1, verse 16 as an example. It's a good example verse that has two instances of the particle serving the dual role of pointing to the direct object as well as meaning with or among. So go to Judges chapter 1, look at verse 16. Judges chapter 1, verse 16. Now, I'm just going to read this in English, and we'll have to just glean from this what we can, okay? Verse 16, Judges chapter 1, verse 16. And the children of the Kenite, Moses' father-in-law, went up out of the city of palm trees with the children of Judah into the wilderness of Judea, which lieth in the south of, and they went and dwelt among the people, okay? So, notice where it says, dwelt among the people. Everybody see that? That's the same particle. And notice it's translated, dwelt among who? The people. So in that verse is the particle translated among. That's what the KJV Today article is saying, right? So let's go back to this. So I'm looking at this sentence right here, starting with Judges 1. Judges 1:16 is a good example verse that has two instances of this occurring, okay? So, notice let's look at in the notes here. I just read the verse, but notice, does this say, with the sons of Judah? I'm in the wrong one. I'm here. With the children of Judah. And then later on, the same particle occurs and is translated among who? Among the people, okay? So, the KJV Today article is saying that is this particle translatable, and is it translated in these verses? In Judges chapter 1, verse 16. But notice they use the New American Standard Bible also, and it's translated here by the NASB translators, with the sons of Judah, and then with the people. ESV does the same thing, where they have went up with the people and settled with the people. And then the 1984 NIV from 1984 edition, notice, with the men of Judea to live among the people. Okay? So, in other words, are all of these modern versions even translating this particle in these verses? Do the King James translators do it in Judges chapter 1? All right? Is everybody following this? I told you this was technical, but it's important. So, thus the Hebrew could be translated as among Goliath. So is there a translatable particle there? Okay? Then look at my bracket. Note the readings found in the 1562 Italian. Another Goliath, and the 1637 Dutch, which was with what? Goliath. Now, doesn't another Goliath from the 1562 Italian and the 1637 Dutch, which was with Goliath, don't those fit nicely with the understanding that you could translate that among Goliath? Is everybody with me? Okay? Meaning, a kinsman of Goliath. The KJV translators understood this among Goliath kinsmen to refer to the brother of Goliath, as this is consistent with 1 Chronicles chapter 20, verse 5. The KJV, with Strong's numbers, indicates that the translators translated the particle as brother of. As the reading of the particle as brother of is an interpretation, albeit the correct one, the KJV translators italicized those words. Okay? So it's an interpretive translation, and so because it's an interpretive translation of the particle, are they putting it into italics? Yes. Okay? So the KJV, New King James, I don't know what the TNIV is. Tuberculosis NIV, I don't know. NIV 2011 and few other translations treat Samuel 21:19 properly by interpreting the particle as brother of. Other translations do not have brother of, create a glaring contradiction with 1 Chronicles chapter 20, verse 5. The reason the author of 2 Samuel did not explicitly write the brother of may be because the immediate readers of 2 Samuel would have been aware that Elhanan killed the brother of Goliath. Now, I have a bracket here. Seems to me a better argument would be readers of 2 Samuel are presumed to have read 1 Samuel and thus already have clarity about who killed Goliath. Okay? 2 Samuel was written during the time of the events, so the readers knew the exact details of the accounts from oral retellings. First Chronicles, however, was written much later, close to the time of Ezra the priest. The chronicler had to be clear that Elhanan killed the brother of Goliath, not Goliath himself. This is why 1 Chronicles chapter 20, verse 5 no longer uses the elliptical language. That's the explanation of the KJV Today article. Now let me ask you a question. Who's got a better explanation? The KJV Today or Gene Kim? Hello. Gene Kim does not have the better explanation. It is the KJV Today article, okay? So before I give you my opinion on this, do you guys have any observations or thoughts here?
I don't think it was necessary because the Hebrew language includes it. So that's what I was looking up earlier is what at could be. And it says on Blue Letter that it's negative particles are terms that negate some aspect of a sentence, either individual word or entire phrase. So it could be like among, but it also could be understood as like not Goliath.
Right.
So the Hebrew readers would understand without 1 Chronicles that this is not Goliath that was being killed by.
So in other words, is the understanding in the text for the Hebrew reader?
Yeah, the Hebrew reader would have understood.
The Hebrew reader would have understood it without, but the English reader is not going to understand it without what? Without adding the italics. Does the italics make it clear? Now, did we see in these pre-King James Bibles, other vernacular translations, that other translators went about trying to capture that same idea using different words? Okay? Any other thoughts before we move on? Yeah.
Didn't we have a reference to it from David himself? Because when he went down to pick up the pebbles to use as ammo, he picked up 5, not because he needed 5, but because there were brothers of Goliath that he was worried about, wasn't it?
Right, it was understood that Goliath had a brother.
Just one, or?
For sure one. I'm going from memory. I don't recall the details. I'd have to go back and read the account. But, yeah, I mean...
Are we told, the other question I had was, are we told if there were multiple giants in the...
I'm pretty sure we are.
Because they were left over from when the angels came down and mingled with humans?
Even if you read Genesis 6, it said there were giants in the land. There were giants in those days, and then it said, and also after that.
Yeah.
And you remember when they sent the spies in, Joshua and Caleb and the other spies, they come back and they report that there's giants in the land, right?
Okay,
So yeah.
There's 4 sons of Goliath.
That's what I was thinking.
Yeah.
So there was like 4 sons, yeah.
So makes sense he's got 5 stones in case he's got to do some more dirty work, okay?
He
So,
wasn't allowing for any mistakes either. But he was very confident.
top page 7.
What if,
What?
What Goliath is a term that you would use for a giant.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I do think that, I think that you could refer to somebody as a Goliath who's not Goliath.
Yeah.
I'm not sure that the biblical text is doing that. I think it's referring to the specific person. Okay?
And then had twins.
I don't know if they were twins, but they were brothers.
And said he was like them.
Maybe they named
That
him.
sounds like that.
I think that could just mean he was like him in the sense that he also was a giant.
Yeah.
All right, so top page 7. In my opinion, the KJV article has hit upon the real reason why the King James translators placed the phrase "the brother of" into 2 Samuel 21:19 in the following statement, quote, As the rendering of the particle as brother of is an interpretation, albeit the correct one, the KJV translators italicized those words. Typically, the KJV has formal equivalents with the English text directly corresponding to underlying Hebrew and Greek. In this instance, there is a bit of interpretation as to what the underlying Hebrew meant, so the King James translators decided to put their correct interpretation in italics for intellectual honesty. That seems to me to be the real reason about why they did this, okay? Which would, of course, stand against a little bit what Scrivener said in his class 1. Because remember, Scrivener said his explanation was just that they're trying to harmonize. And then when we look at it a little bit more deeply, we see that, well, there might be a particle here that is translatable that would have been understood to the Hebrew reader, but needs a little clarification in English, thus the insertion of the phrase "the brother of." And by the way, were the French and Italian and other translators and the Dutch translators, were they aware of the same phenomenon, and did they act accordingly when doing their translations? Okay, so there is no doubt in my mind that the King James translators looked at the marginalia, in the Geneva and Bishop's Bibles, as well as the text of the Italian and French Bibles that predated the King James Bible, for insight into how to render 2 Samuel 21:19. Recall from lesson 191 that the following was stated in the epistle dedicatory at the beginning of the 1611, quote, "For when your highness had once out of deep judgment apprehended how convenient it was that out of the original sacred tongues," that would be what? Hebrew and Greek, "together with comparing of the laborers both in our own and other foreign languages, of many worthy men who went before us, there should be one more exact translation of the Holy Scriptures into the English tongue. Your Majesty did never desist to urge and to excite those to whom it was commended that the work might be hastened and the business might be expedited in so decent a manner as a matter of such importance might justly require." Notice what I have bolded there, and other foreign what? Languages. Okay? So it's totally conceivable, and I think probable, that not only are the translators looking at the Hebrew, do they look at the Geneva and the bishops, do they see the marginal note, and then do they look at these French and Italian Bibles that predate the 1611, and do they see how those guys handled it, and do they therefore act similarly by their own choice and accord in the 1611? Okay? So, why are these historical and textual facts never discussed by many King James Version only authors? We applaud the KJV today author or authors, the exact authors is unclear, for being willing to question the prevailing narrative within King James onlyism and arrive at research-based conclusions. Okay? So before we move on to our second example, does anybody have any questions or comments about case study number 1? No? Okay, so the second one, I hope we have time to get through it, is 1 John chapter 2, verse 23. So let's get right into it. 1 John chapter 2, verse 23 is another verse that gets a lot of attention in King James Version only discussion of the AV's italics. In this verse, the entire second half of the verse is in italics, thereby constituting the lengthiest continuous section of italics in the Authorized Version. And there's the verse, quote, "Whosoever denieth the Son, the same hath not the Father. But he that acknowledgeth the Son hath the Father also." So that entire second half of the verse is in italics. This is the longest continuous section of italics in the King James Bible. Okay? Recall from lesson 260 that we discussed this verse under F.H.A. Scrivener's 5th classification of italics usage in the Authorized Version, and he said, quote, "Another use of italics is to indicate that a word or clause is of doubtful authority as a matter of textual criticism." So that's what he said. So again, consider what Gene Kim has to say about 1 John 2, verse 23 in his YouTube video titled, "Why KJV Should Add to God's Word, Part 2. So this is the same video we quoted before. Look at top page 8. That's just amazing, is it not? Look at 1 John. If modern version scholars are going to claim, oh, the italicized words are not in the original, the italicized words are not in the originals, let me give you something that should scare them. We're not going to go to the manuscript family evidence of the King James Version. Now, if you remember in my previous videos, I showed you the manuscript family of the King James Version, which came from the Byzantine traditional text type, and I showed you an enemy manuscript family of the King James Version. So he's arguing here for the two streams. The enemy manuscript family of the King James Version, which modern versions come from, as you might recall, is the Alexandrian manuscripts, which is Codex Sinaiticus and Codex Vaticanus. All right, so Codex Sinaiticus and Codex Vaticanus. So I'm just going to write A and B. So B is Vaticanus and A is Sinaiticus. Those are their initials and apparatuses, okay? But anyway, these, A and B, are the two manuscripts that are against the King James Version. They're Alexandrian manuscripts. We're not going through KJV manuscripts. We're going to go with modern version scholars' manuscript evidence. Look at 1 John 2:23. This is the longest italicized passage you'll ever see. Whosoever denieth the Son, the same hath not the Father. Half of that verse is in italics. But he that acknowledgeth the Son hath the Father also. Oh, so that should not be in the originals. Oh, watch your mouth. You know what they found out. Oh, it's not found in the majority of Greek manuscripts. So since it's not found in the majority of Greek manuscripts, you know this is not in the original. Okay, it may not be here, but you're denying other ancient manuscripts too. King James Version, you must understand, is such a superior Bible because it's got everything from the majority of Greek manuscripts, which is Byzantine traditional. It's also a culmination of other kinds of manuscripts. So guess what? You know what supported this passage? Boom, boom. Alexandrian manuscripts had that. And I thought the modern scholars, they're all for Alexandrian manuscripts A and B. They're the ones that really show the original. And now they're saying right here that the italicized words in your King James Bible are not part of the original. See that? Quite a contradiction here. Quite a contradiction right here. And we're going by our own manuscript evidence. Look at that. See? Don't. So you better be careful when you correct that book, because somewhere along the line, you're going to find out God has some manuscript out there that's going to support the King James Bible. So be careful. Watch your mouth. Watch your mouth. Okay? Now, moving on for the sake of time. Kim, argues in defense of the King James Bible by particularly emphasizing 1 John 2:23, where part of the verse, but he that acknowledgeth the Son hath the Father also, is italicized in the King James Version, indicating that it was added for clarity because the phrase is not in the TR editions, Textus Receptus editions, available to the King James translators. He points out that although this part of the verse is not found in the majority of Greek manuscripts in the Byzantine tradition, it is present in Alexandrian manuscripts, namely Codex Sinaiticus A and Codex Vaticanus B. These are the very manuscripts that modern Bible versions are based on. This creates a contradiction, Kim claims. Modern scholars favor Alexandrian manuscripts, yet they criticize the King James for including this italicized text, even though their own preferred manuscripts support it. Ultimately, Kim's message is, be cautious when criticizing the King James Version, because even non-Byzantine sources can affirm its readings, implying divine providence in the preservation of the King James text. Okay? So the implication of Kim's statements, now listen, the implication of Kim's statements is that God led the King James translators by inspiration to include the italicized words in English before there was known Greek manuscript evidence to support the reading. That's what he's saying. Notice that Kim does not provide any textual data to support his position. The argument here is essentially that the King James Version is superior to the Greek because it reveals information not found in the Greek known to the King James Version translators. Does everybody understand what he's saying? So do the King James translators almost make like a divine guess to include the italicized words because they didn't have it in any manuscript evidence they were looking at? Okay? Everybody understand? Okay? So, where did Kim obtain such a view? He was taught it by his mentor, Dr. Peter S. Ruckman. Kim is a 2007 graduate of Ruckman's Pensacola Bible Institute. In 1988, Ruckman stated the following in his book, The Christian's Handbook of Biblical Scholarship, quote, "Why give up any of the rest? Out of the 700 changes made in the 26th edition of Nestle's, if only 467 were restorations of the correct text, the one we went with since 1611, why should we accept the other 230 are reliable? Wait, 8 years and all 230 of them will be brought back in line with the Receptus. You just have to be patient. While you are reading the Bible and getting a blessing, winning souls, training foreign missionaries, holding revivals, comforting the bereaved, marrying the young, burying the dead, praying, and rejoicing in God, these eggheads are waiting to decide if you have the right reading. When we had it before, they began to look at it. Now, just very quick, what he's saying is these modern editions of the critical text are inconsistent. In one edition, they'll say these 200 some odd readings are illegitimate, only to reinstate them in the next edition. Does everybody understand what he's saying? Okay, next paragraph. For example, 1 John 2:23. We had the, quote, original Greek supplied in the italics. When the Authorized version translators confessed they were putting it in on their own, they guessed right. He's saying they what? Guessed. It showed up in Greek manuscripts after the publication of the 1611. He's further saying that there was Greek manuscript evidence for the phrase after when? After 1611, okay? Though it was not in the majority text, neither was 1 John 5, 7, and 8, which showed up in Sinaiticus, Vaticanus, Alexandrinus, and Ephraemi Scriptus after 1611. Murphy's Law. Anytime a translation looks like an improvement on the AV, you have overlooked something. And that's from Ruckman. And then likewise, he argues in September 1995 issue of Bible Believers Bulletin, there is an article titled James White's 7 Errors in the Authorized Version, in which Ruckman addresses the italics in 1 John 2:23. He says, quote, now White's reasoning is as follows. If there are no variants, then we have indeed the original. See King James Version Only Controversy, pages 118, 124. Since he has found no variant against their purification, he's speaking about something else, okay? Drop down to the next paragraph then. Just go to number 10. You understand he's picking, for the sake of time, go to page 10. Look at the first paragraph. This is still the same quote. He's making the same point he was making before, though. You say it couldn't happen, it did. In 1 John 2:23, the AV translators put half of the verse in italics, 1611, going by no Greek manuscripts. So in the other one he said they guessed, and in this one he explicitly says that they put it in without any what? And without any Greek evidence to do so. Okay? Nessel printed the Greek text, 1979, that matches the italics in the King James Receptus. He printed it more than 278 years, 1898, after the AV supplied him the words in English, not Greek. So White, instead of rushing in like a mad fool, should have been more scholarly and checked his facts. He was operating on an emotional level, which is somewhat humorous because I feel that's exactly what he's doing. Okay? So, essentially, Ruckman highlights that in 1 John 2:23, the King James translators included half the verse in italics, even though those words were not found in any, and I've emphasized that, Greek manuscripts available in 1611. Yet over 270 years later, the Nessel Greek text, okay, printed the same wording in Greek, matching what the King James Version had already supplied in English. This is presented as evidence that the King James translators were correct, even without manuscript support at their time. Okay? Now, does anybody have any comments or questions before we hit the last bit of this run-in? Nate?
I just wonder what running to the critical text would do to your position, from their position.
Yeah.
It's kind of odd.
So that,
I'm not sure what I think about it yet.
so what they're basically saying is, these modern version advocates, these critical text advocates, they criticize the italics in the King James, yet their pet darling manuscripts have the words in them in Greek.
Right. I just, without supplying any other evidence for why it should be there, it almost seems like they're admitting some level of authority to the critical text.
Sure does. Mike, did you have something?
Well, the second half of that verse is really implied by the first half. And that might have been some reason why the translation.
Okay. Yeah, let's look at some more evidence here. Ruckman's argument is not entirely accurate. Now that's going to make some people madder than wet hens at me. Okay? While it is true that early printed editions of the Textus Receptus, such as the Complutensian Polyglot, as well as the editions of Erasmus Stephanus and the early editions of Beza, did not have the Greek clause in question in 1 John 2:23. Beza's 5th edition from 1598 did include the phrase. The following screenshots are from Theodore Beza's 1568 first edition of the Greek New Testament, along with his 1598 5th edition. Note the additional underlying characters in the 1598 edition. The first example is taken from Nick Sayers' textusreceptus.com website, okay? So notice, here's the first edition of Beza, here's the Greek text, okay? This is from 1568, and then notice the 5th edition from 1598, and notice, does it have the Greek in question that would correspond to the italicized words in English? Does it?
Yes.
Okay, so let's just stop right there. Ruckman said that this did not exist in Greek before 1611. That is not a true what? Statement. Okay? Going on, top page 11. The Textus Receptus Bible's website states the following under variants in their analytical entry for 1 John 2:23. Quote, "This verse is not fully supported by Stephanus 1550, but is supported by Beza 1598. In addition, Beza also appended the following footnote to verse 23 in his 1598 edition at the bottom of pages 497 and the top of 498. Okay, so here's the footnote. So this is the bottom of 497 here, and then it extends to the top of the page here. Okay, so here's what I want you to see. Does he have a footnote appended to verse 23? Okay, we'll look at what it means in a minute. Brother Robert Vaughn discusses Beza's footnote in his excellent article, 1 John 2:23. Beza's note reads as follows. Notice, this is the translation. He who professes, he gives it in both Latin and Greek. Okay, now watch. This clause has been restored in the Greek from 4 manuscript codices. Stop right there. On what authority did Beza add that to his 5th edition? He's seen 4 Greek manuscript codices that have the italicized words in them by 1598 when he adds that to the verse. So again, when Ruckman says there's no manuscript evidence before 1611 to support this reading, that is absolutely, positively not true. Just go read what Beza said in 1598. Is everybody following me? Okay. So let's read the rest of that just so we got it. Okay. The clause has been restored in the Greek from 4 manuscript codices with the authority of the Old Latin and the Syriac interpreter. John also is inclined to such such oppositions by contrasting statements very frequently, and Beza tells people to see Matthew 10:32 as an example. So that's what you have, as Mike said, the contrast, that the one phrase kind of implies what? The other, okay? So I would like to consider some additional comments on 1 John 2:23 from the pen of Lawrence M. Vance in the text of the King James Bible. Quote, "Although the phrase is in the Vulgate, it is not in Erasmus's Latin translation. It is also not found in the Greek of the Complutensian Polyglot, Stephanus, or Elzevir, and neither does it appear in the majority text. However, Beza includes the phrase in his last 3 editions." Then he gives you the Greek, and then underneath that he says, this is also the reading of the critical text. The reason why the word "but" is in italics in the King James Bible is because it is not found in the Greek text, but deemed essential to the English sense, and he identifies that again as one of Scrivener's categories. Okay, so from this we see that Beza was aware of the italicized clause being in at least 4 Greek manuscript codices, as well as the Old Latin and Syriac witnesses before the year 1600. He therefore included the phrase in the Greek text of his 5th edition from 1598. So, Ruckman is not accurate. Now that is going to be like a sin to say, but he is just factually and objectively, did he get it wrong?
Yes.
Thank you. Yes. So, since 1598 predates 1611, we can conclude Ruckman's statement cited above as not correct. There was Greek evidence for the reading at the time the King James was translated. Moreover, neither Ruckman nor Kim makes any attempt to consider the state of the textual evidence before 1611. Some pre-1611 English Bibles did include the last half of 1 John 2:23 in italics or Roman font. So we're going to go through this quick. Look at page 12. Okay? Here's the Great Bible, 1539. You'll notice, does it include in brackets and smaller font the phrase in question? Yes. The 1568 Bishop's Bible includes the phrase in brackets and smaller font, as does the 1602 Bishop's Bible, which was the immediate predecessor of the King James. It includes it here in Roman font, not in dark letter or black Gothic font. So, the King James translators inherited a base text, the 1602 bishops, that already had the second half of 1 John 2:23 in italics. Moreover, as we have already seen, the phrase was in the Greek text of Beza's 1598 Greek New Testament. Not only are these facts never discussed by Ruckman and Kim, but they are flatly contradicted by both in their statements that no Greek witness at the time of the translation contained the phrase in question. Is everybody following me? Yes?
Yes.
So, translated from Latin, the italicized phrase is also in Wycliffe's Bible from the 1380s. Therefore, the reading in question was known in the Latin tradition for centuries before 1611. And I have it underlined here. You can kind of make it out. But he that knoweth the Son hath also the Father in Middle English. Okay? And then I gave it to you there also underneath, bottom of the page. In addition to the Latin tradition, the italicized phrase in 1 John 2:23 exists in the following Reformation-era Protestant, should say Bibles, predating the Authorized version. Please consider the following screenshots furnished by Christopher Yetzer. So now notice we go all the way back to a 1532 Italian, and it has the phrase. It's underlined right here, and it is not in italics. Notice, whoever denies the Son, this is the translation, this one does not have the Father either. Whoever confesses the Son also has the Father. Okay? So not only does this Italian translation predate the 1611 AV, but it also includes the phrase in question in normal, i.e. non-italic font. So I'm going to go quick here just for the sake of time. Is it in a 1569 Spanish Bible? Yes. Okay? Is it in a 1588 French Bible?
Yes.
Yes. Is it in a 1602 Spanish Bible? Absolutely. Yes. Go to page 14. Is it in the 1607 Diodati Italian Bible? Yes. Okay? So, I'm on page 14 under the Diodati. You guys can look at all the rest of that. Admittedly, there were also some Reformation-era foreign language Bibles that did not include the phrase in question, such as Olivetan's 1535 French Bible. The 1638 Dutch did not have the phrase in the text, but the reading was noted in a marginal note. Okay? So, once again, when it comes to the italics, the talking points of King James onlyism are found wanting. When it comes to 1 John chapter 2, verse 23, the following is the most charitable explanation of what occurred. Okay? Rule number 1 is given to the translators. Rule 1, given to the translators, stated the following, quote, "The ordinary Bible read in the church, commonly called the Bishop's Bible, is to be followed and as little altered as the truth of the original will permit." That was their starting rule. So did they start then with a 1602 Bishop's Bible that has the phrase in italics?
Yes.
Yes. Number 2, the King James translators inherited a text, the 1602 bishops, that already had the second half of 1 John 2:23 in italics. See the image above. I already kind of said that. Number 3, the translators compared the bishop's text against known printed editions of the Textus Receptus and observed the mixed nature of the Greek support even between the editions of Beza, his 1598 fifth and most recent edition containing the clause. 4, next, the translators compared the English text against Bibles in other foreign languages, where they observed that the italicized clause is present in the Italian 1532, 1607, Spanish 1569, 1602, and a French Bible from 1588. Being familiar with the Latin tradition as well as the Wycliffe Bible from the 1380s, which contained the phrase in question, it seems reasonable to conclude the following. Given the mixed nature of the textual evidence, the translators did not see enough overwhelming evidence to remove the phrase completely, nor did they think it prudent to alter the bishop's text and place the phrase in black letter font like the rest of the verse. So in other words, they decide to just what? Leave it the way it is. And was it that way in the bishops, and was it that way in the Great Bible? Okay? Let's go to the conclusion. Conclusion. The conclusion that the King James translators were operating blindly or guessing by divine revelation to include the italics before the known existence of a manuscript and or printed edition containing the italicized words in question simply does not square with the facts on the ground. There is no way that is a factually based position. It's the faith-based position. Well, aw shucks, I'm just going to believe what I believe by faith. Now, look, without faith it's impossible to please God, right? But in cases where evidence is available, should you seek out the evidence? Okay? So let me start that again. The conclusion that the King James translators were operating blindly or guessing by divine revelation to include the italics before the known existence of a manuscript and or printed edition containing the italicized words in question simply does not square with the facts on the ground. Yet again, the explanations furnished by certain sectors of the King James only movement regarding the italics are found wanting when compared against the textual and historical facts. I'm sorry, but what Ruckman and Kim said is just factually, demonstrably false. It's not true. Okay? Praise the Lord for more honest defenders of the Authorized version, such as brothers Robert Vaughn and Christopher Yetzer, who've written on the subject of the italicized words. And then I shared with you there 3 links to some nice articles that Robert Vaughn has written. Okay? Now, we are essentially up against the clock and out of time. So just one reminder, next Sunday we are not going to have this class because of Easter. We will be having our church breakfast. We will come back for one more lesson on this at the end of April. And then in May we're going to start the class on logic. Okay? Does anybody have any comments or questions about anything that's been said in this lesson? We covered 15 pages of ground in an hour. Amen. All right, anybody have any comments or questions?
I think that we don't know exactly all the information that the translators had at their disposal. I mean, I don't think any of that has been.
That's fair.
And so it's obvious that they had this information.
The information that I furnished here with Christopher Yetzer's help, they clearly had access to.
Yeah.
And the statements made by Ruckman and Kim are just absolutely not even true. So they built an entire position off of stuff that's not accurate. And then they've made that orthodoxy. And if you question that orthodoxy, now you're a heretic and you don't really believe your Bible. You're not a real Bible believer. Because we just have a faith position. One of my prime critics says that he takes refuge all the time in his statement that mine is a faith position, indicating that people who don't agree with that are not operating by what? Faith. That is a false dichotomy. It is not true. My position is a faith position informed by the factual evidence. Right? That's where you want to be. Not holding positions that all somebody has to do is come along with more facts, evidence, and warranting, and there goes your whole sandcastle. Okay? Anybody else? Listen, the reason I believe what I believe about the King James Bible is because I believe by faith the doctrines of inspiration and preservation. And that God inspired and preserved His Word throughout the duration of the history of Israel and the church age during the dispensation of grace, thereby making it available to the King James translators in the early 17th century to accurately translate into my language. I don't believe there's errors in the King James Bible. I don't believe there's translational mistakes in the King James Bible. And I believe the King James Bible contains all the correct readings. I believe that modern versions err, and they are not substantively the same as the preserved text in the King James Bible. So there you have it. We got a break from this now for a week, and then we'll come back and I'll have some final things to say about the italics, and then we're going to move on in May to talking about the logic stuff. Appreciate everybody's attention, and we'll see you next